Mother Knows Death, starring Nicole and Jemmy and Maria Q. Kane.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mother Knows Death. We have a great episode for you today. We have a lot of crazy stories, including a child who died from inhaling helium from a balloon, a man who had to have his toes amputated because of his wedding shoes, getting botulism from Botox, a deadly infection from a sinus, and a woman who woke up alive in her coffin. All that and more on today's episode. Let's get started with helium balloons.
Yeah, so this 6-year-old boy died after inhaling helium from a mylar balloon just days after celebrating his birthday.
Do you remember we had a case back in February of a woman who died from inhaling helium as well?
Yeah, at her kid's birthday party.
Yeah, I mean, her case was a little different because she was sucking it directly out of the canister, which was terrible. But this is a 6-year-old kid that was inhaling it to, make that signature really high-pitched voice. He was sucking it out of a large mylar balloon. And the helium, it's the same exact thing that we talk about all the time. Like, would you let your kid do a whip it?
No, but I really don't think people understand the severity of this because I see people do this so often.
I know.
I've seen it I just was watching a TV show last night where they did it as a joke.
I'm telling you right now, this is a crazy story. I probably told this on here before, but I was across the street with my neighbors, and the one neighbor is a nurse. She's a good nurse too. And me and her sitting back there, and our kids were like, let's do that. So then we did it, and we were laughing, and it was like this weird thing that we both looked at each other and was like, wait, this is probably really fucking bad. And I look it up, and sure enough, it's, because this isn't something that you normally hear about happening, even in practice in pathology. It doesn't happen that often. So when it happens, it's a big story. And I'm just like, it's probably not good. We're gonna look it up. Let's look it up. We look it up, and sure enough, it's just like, oh yeah, that it's just as bad as doing a whippet or anything else, right? And then we're like the bad parents. Of course, we're the bad parents for letting the kids do it. I don't know if the kids actually did it or we did it first, but we were just like, yeah, we're never doing this again. This is freaking terrible. And now every single time a story like this comes up, I'm gonna send her the story today because it scares you because you're like, oh my God, we were just doing that to have fun with the kids, and it's a party trick, right? Since you were a kid, and no, it's terrible, and it needs the word needs to be spread how bad it is because unfortunately this little 6-year-old kid died from this.
Yeah, I mean, I really just think it boils down to people just, like you say, they think about making their voice funny. They don't think about how dangerous it actually is to inhale a chemical like this.
Yeah.
All right, so in the UK, this man got a pair of orthotic shoes from the NHS for his wedding day. He immediately told them the shoes were uncomfortable and too tight, but they told him they were just breaking in still. So he wore them for a few hours on his wedding day until it became unbearable, and then within weeks he got an abscess which resulted in his toes needing to be amputated.
So this same exact thing happened to my dad. He had to have an orthotic, and he kept telling them it was uncomfortable, and it was rubbing against his leg, and to the point where he was just like, I'm not going to wear it anymore because it hurts so bad. I don't know if that's considered to be normal to happen with these things, but this guy was complaining for a while. And really, when a person is complaining about having an uncomfortable thing on their feet, especially this guy because he had diabetes, you want to make sure that they're not getting an injury, because what happens is, number one, they have neuropathy and they can't have as much feeling as a normal person would have sometimes in their feet. So he got this really bad wound and an ulceration because of the rubbing and didn't even really realize it until much later on when it was much worse than it should have been. He should have gotten treatment for it a long time before then. Plus, when you're diabetic, you have damage to your blood vessels, so you're not getting enough oxygenated blood down there to heal wounds. So you have wounds that don't heal as quickly or don't heal at all, which is why it's important for you to get treatment for it as soon as something pops up. And then number three, just being diabetic and having high blood sugar can make an environment that bacteria really like, all that sugar. So you just have such an increased risk for infections when you have diabetes, especially in your feet. And that's a well-known fact. That's why they say don't cut your toenails yourself, don't get a pedicure, get it done by a medical professional just to make sure that you don't get any little tiny wound that would end up being a serious thing, like having to get an amputation. And think about this, like how many times have you worn shoes that are uncomfortable that give you blisters and it's fine because you're healthy and it heals good, but for a diabetic patient, this is the difference between having a foot and not having a foot. So in this case, he had to get his big toe amputated and then he had to get several other toes amputated. That's usually how it goes. So in pathology, we'll get a toe and then we'll get a couple more toes and then we'll get the rest of the foot and then we'll get all the way up until the knee and sometimes even above the knee, depending on how bad the gangrene is. So unfortunately, in this case, he lost his toes and now he wants to take action against this orthotic company.
So can you still walk if you have the rest of your foot but no toes?
You can, but it's difficult because your toes are your balance. So he probably has to walk with assistance with like a cane or something like that. And the guy just got married and he was walking perfectly fine before then. So it definitely is debilitating. He honestly would probably do better if he got his leg amputated below the knee and got a prosthetic as far as walking goes.
Well, didn't you recommend Pop-Up get his foot amputated?
I did.
And they freaked out.
Everybody thought that I was so outrageous for saying that, but my dad was having a really hard time walking and the orthotics weren't working. And then he had the surgery and it was, one thing leads to another because then you don't walk and then all of a sudden you're gaining more weight because you're not walking and it all works itself off of each other. But yeah, I said to my dad 20 years ago now, I was just like, Dad, get the freaking foot amputated and get a prosthetic and then you'll be able to walk. But no one listens to me, whatever. They thought that I was outrageous for saying that. But listen, in pathology, I've gotten lots of legs for people that were just like painful leg. That you look at it and you're like, there's no gangrene, there's nothing wrong with it. They just had chronic pain. And it sometimes makes more sense to just get rid of whatever's causing the pain and then just start over with a fake one. Not that you wouldn't have any kind of challenges having a prosthetic leg, because you do for sure, but how many people do you see walking around with them like they work,
This episode is brought to you by The Gross Room.
Guys, we're having a sale that we only have a few times a year, which is $20 for an entire 365 days of gross. And let me tell you, if you have never been a member, you will have enough content to look at for those 365 days because we're putting something out almost every single day. And on top of that, there's over 3,000 posts in the Gross Room dating back to 2019 where there are thousands of videos, articles, photos of just the most gruesome and amazing things that you could think of.
Yeah, head over to thegrossroom.com now to sign up. Okay, so 10 cases of botulism have been connected to one spa in Massachusetts. So can you explain what this is?
So, well, yes, because a lot of our listeners are probably getting Botox, right? And if you guys know what Botox is, like really is, it stands for botulism toxin. So Botox, right? It was discovered that the botulism toxin, it's a neurotoxin caused by the bacteria called Clostridium botulinum. And it was discovered that if it was, and FDA approved, that if it was injected in the glabella, which is the frown lines right here, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, that it would paralyze essentially the muscles and it would cause it to look like you don't have wrinkles, which is why the whole Botox craze happened, because it really does work. Like, look, I can't even move my forehead right now. But it's also been used for cosmetics for now it's just like going off the hook. Like people are using it to like stop sweating under their armpits and to flip their lip up if they don't like it, and to hold in their muscle underneath their chin if they feel like that's a problem. And it's going all over the place, and that's fine. But with social media and everything, it's like everybody wants it, and it's kind of expensive for some people. So then they start going to people that maybe aren't the best injectors, but say they have the Botox, and this is what's happening. So whenever you go to get Botox, because it has the potential to be so dangerous. You want to make sure that you go to somebody that is an expert injector, and really, I personally think that you should go to somebody that does it for a career. I go to Dr. Dimitri in Morristown, and he's awesome. Shout out to him. I'm actually going to him tomorrow. Um, and I'll talk to him about this case for sure and come back if he has any interesting things to say. But he only specifically does that. And I think that that's really important because it's like he's an expert of it. It's all he does. And he knows what's wrong and he knows what's right. And he knows the anatomy. And on top of that, he's using legit products. He's not getting things like off of Amazon or wherever people are getting these drugs that they shouldn't be buying them from. So I even would, and I've talked to Dr. Dimitri about this, I would go as far to say that I wouldn't go, like, if your dentist is like, hey, I started doing Botox, or your family doctor's like, hey, I started doing Botox, like, I wouldn't do it, personally. That's just me. But this is where you get risk of things going wrong with people that don't really know it that well. But you certainly shouldn't go to a place that is not legit, because that's probably what happened in this case. So sometimes if it's either the actual product or it's just not being injected correctly, when it is applied correctly, it just stays local to the muscle and it paralyzes the muscle. The last thing you want it to do is to take up inside of your bloodstream and go around your body, because then you're going to have classic symptoms of botulism. And it's just really, really bad. So these people were having this, what's called iatrogenic botulism, which is it spread beyond where it was injected. So blurred vision, double vision, slurred speech, breathing difficulties. That's kind of a real bad problem that you don't want to have, especially when you're going to get rid of a wrinkle. The last thing you want is your eyeball to be drooping and your eyelid won't stay open. I mean, how terrible would that be? And having problems with your vision and things like that. So this is just a really important lesson, that make sure you go to somebody who's legit. And if you don't have the money for it, then just like skip that time instead of going to somebody that's going to give you a botched job.
Well, could this happen at legit
Botulism.
places too?
What?
This could happen at legit places too, though.
Well,
it's just more
if
likely.
they're using legit, if they're using legit product, it could still happen if it's not injected correctly, and a lot of different things that can happen if things aren't, including fillers too. That's why it's so important, because I know you're looking at a face and you're just looking at skin and you're seeing wrinkles, but underneath of that skin, it's just like, think about being in New York City. Like, you're looking at the street level and think about all the things that are happening underground. There's subways, there's pipes, there's this, there's that, right? It's the same exact thing with your face. You have nerves, you have blood vessels, you have like certain things that cannot be touched. And somebody has to be an expert in anatomy of the face to know exactly where to put a needle and inject this stuff. Because if you inject it in a blood vessel, it could be terrible. If you inject it in a nerve, it could be terrible, and it could cause permanent damage. So you really want to make sure that you're going to someone who's legit and is a master of it.
All right, so a woman in Texas has died after contracting a brain amoeba from using tap water at an RV campground and using it in her sinus rinse.
We talked about this recently too, right? Maybe not recently, but it was last year actually. Remember, we were talking about a baby who died from a brain-eating amoeba from visiting a water park in Arkansas?
Yeah, we definitely had a discussion about using tap water in a neti pot before too, because I had told you that I definitely did it one time. But after that, I was like, that definitely wasn't smart. So,
well, they sell that squeezy bottle. I don't know if that's the neti pot too or whatever.
Well, the pot, I think so there's various versions of the sinus rinse, which is the squeezy bottle like you're talking about, or there's like the physical ceramic pot. That's the one I use.
So, but you put that solution of the powder into it, but it says all over the place, because I had to give them to Lillian before. It says all over the place to use either distilled water or to boil the water.
Yeah.
You can't blow that off, and this is exactly why, because you're entering you think about drinking water. I mean, it's kind of gross if it's coming out of a tap, right? There's all different sorts of things in there. One of them it could be an amoeba that's called Naegleria fowleri, and this was found in this woman's spinal fluid. It's called a brain-eating amoeba. It's not a bacteria. It's kind of like a parasite, honestly. Um, it causes meningoencephalitis, which is when there's an inflammation of the brain as well as the meninges that are the thin membranes that cover the brain. Um, and it's really bad. It's really, really deadly. There's been 164 cases reported in the United States, and only 4 people have survived. So it's rare, but when you get it, especially because it's so rare. Like, think about 164 cases over, I don't even know what it was, over a 10-year period.
No,
That's
from 1962 to 2023, that was the 164.
Yeah. So think about this from a doctor's perspective. If a person, this lady was a 71-year-old lady that was pretty healthy and then started having symptoms, right? Same exact thing with this kid, 16-month-old baby started having symptoms of a fever, vomiting, and stuff like that. Like, when you're a physician at a hospital, this is the last thing on your mind that's happening to a person until you start doing investigation, which might take a while to figure out exactly what happened, and then it's too late.
Well, what's scary in this case, too, is she didn't even start presenting symptoms for 4 days, and then she died 8 days later. So I feel like because it wasn't immediate, that's even harder to figure out what happened.
Well, if she started displaying symptoms right away and someone figured out right away what it was, it could be, I mean, that's why people have survived, because you don't have to die from it, I guess, but by the time they're figuring it out, it's too late. And honestly, like, they do the spinal tap and they figure it out. I don't know how because I don't know if it would be really a culture, like, I'm not exactly sure of the test that would be done for it, so, and how long that takes. Just because it's weird, and we talk about that sometimes on this program, that, like, in hindsight, yeah, but think about a 16-month-old kid that's vomiting and it's crying. Like, okay, that's every 16-month-old kid. Like, why would you ever think they have a brain-eating amoeba, you know?
Do you guys take spinal fluid at every autopsy, or just in a case where you're having a hard time figuring out?
We don't take spinal fluid at autopsy. They might use it sometimes, well, for like toxicology or something like that, but we, like a typical autopsy, we wouldn't take spinal fluid. They take spinal fluid from a person, like, while they're still alive, to be able, like, they diagnosed this from this woman when she was still alive. They did a spinal tap and pulled out the fluid, and then that's how they were able to determine it was there. That would be like a toxicology situation, though. It wouldn't be something that you would do on a routine autopsy for sure, because think about this. Like, if we were doing it for even on this woman, like, we have access. The reason you want to do the spinal fluid is because that fluid bathes the spinal cord and brain, right? So if any infection or weird thing is in the brain, you would think that bacteria would get into the spinal fluid, and it's an easy access to see what's going on, because otherwise you would have to cut open a person's skull and, like, take a biopsy of their brain, and that would be kind of crazy, right? So, but when you have the autopsy and you have the dead person right in front of you, you have their brain tissue, you have access to, like, the meat, so, like, you don't need to look at the fluid.
Well, guys, it's important to boil the water, use distilled water. We have to learn from these stories, because these are, I mean, obviously this is a rare situation, but it's still scary.
And I believe, honestly, like, I'm not sure how, because I don't know much about this organism. I wonder if lots of people are exposed to it all the time and just people don't get sick from it, because I have a hard time believing that, like, only 164 people have been exposed to this and got sick from it. I
Well,
just
you're
think
relying on people that have reported it too, because there has to be so many that aren't.
And there's probably situations where people die from it and maybe they never figure it out. They're just like, oh, they just had this crazy brain infection. I don't know what happened. I don't know, you know. And since the 60s, you don't know what the documentation's been, so.
Yeah. All right. In the Czech Republic, an 88-year-old woman was found unresponsive by her husband. EMTs and the coroner determined she was dead. Undertaker showed up, put her in a coffin. So while she's sitting in this coffin in the hallway to her apartment building, she ends up waking up.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't a typical protocol in the United States to bring the coffin directly to the person, but why not, right? I mean, it just,
Cuts
it
out a
saves
bunch of
unnecessary steps kind of to go, oh, you got to go to a hospital first and then a funeral home or whatever. I mean, it's just interesting that they would do that, but whatever. Yeah, I guess when the husband, the woman was older in her 80s, and the husband called and had the ambulance come, and he thought that she might have died. The ambulance pronounced her dead. Then the coroner came in and pronounced her dead too. I don't know what the rules are of pronouncing a person dead there. They're supposed to note the general appearance of the body, if there's any reaction to like verbal or pain stimuli. One important thing is to look at the pupils and see that they're fixed. They don't move if you shine a light on them. Like, I don't know if you've ever done this, but just like put a flashlight when Ricky gets home from work tonight, like put a flashlight up to his light. The light makes your pupils open up really wide.
Well, yeah, it's the same way a camera lens operates.
Exactly. So when a person's dead, that doesn't work anymore. You check their breathing. It just should be a combination of different things. You check their breathing. You don't hear any lung sounds. There's no pulse of their carotid artery, or there's no pulse on their wrist. You can't hear their heart. And obviously, like, if there's signs, you could call somebody, you could pronounce someone dead pretty quickly if they're decomposed or whatever, but obvious signs of death, rigor mortis, livor mortis, and things like that. But clearly they didn't go through the protocol because she was still alive. And in fact, she was brought to the hospital and she's still alive in the hospital. Now, this goes to think like, okay, because they didn't seem like they tried to resuscitate her until they figured out that she was alive. So, I mean, she's 88 years old, whatever. She doesn't have, you could say that she doesn't have a ton of time left anyway, but people live to be 100. She could at least have 12 years of life left. Like, they didn't even try. They were like, yeah, she's dead.
Well, what's interesting is this is called the Lazarus effect, which is named after Jesus raising Lazarus back from the dead. So it's defined as when a patient will begin to show signs of life and must continue to show these signs for more than a few seconds, which typically happens after somebody performs CPR on a person. But they're saying between 1982 and 2022, there was 74 confirmed cases of Lazarus effect in the United States.
Really? I don't know. I don't declare people dead. So
you know
I'm
what
not
people
sure.
are like, I
They're
died
always
for a
dead
couple
when I see-
seconds.
Well, there's a difference between, yes, people say that, and I don't know what that's all about. Like, honestly, and nobody really does, because nobody could study that fully. But you could have cardiac arrest that could be reversible. Like, your heart could stop and it could get restarted again. We saw it happen with that. What was that one football player's name? It happened right on
Damar
the field.
Hamlin. Yeah, so there's
His heart stopped. He could tell people he died, because he technically did, and then it got started again, right?
So that's what they're saying with this Lazarus. I can't say, of course I can't say this. With this effect, they're saying it
Lazarus?
is typically with patients and having heart problems.
Yeah, so I mean, it could, your heart could stop and it could get restarted, and you could go on to live like a healthy life. But there's also irreversible damage, heart damage, brain damage, and things like that. So I'm not sure what happened in this case, but she wasn't dead.
All right, well, on that note, if you guys want to buy tickets for the Atlanta meet and greet, please head over to the description of this episode, the Gross Room, or social media for those tickets. And if you want to head over to our Spotify or Apple and leave us a review, subscribe to our YouTube, or if you have a story for us, please submit it to stories@motherknowsdeath.com.
Don't forget, the Gross Room is on sale for $20 if you want to get in this weekend.
See you guys next week.
See ya. Thank you for listening to Mother Knows Death. As a reminder, my training is as a pathologist assistant. I have a master's level education and specialize in anatomy and pathology education. I am not a doctor, and I have not diagnosed or treated anyone, dead or alive, without the assistance of a licensed medical doctor. This show, my website, and social media accounts are designed to educate and inform people based on my experience working in pathology, so they can make healthier decisions regarding their life and well-being. Always remember that science is changing every day, and the opinions expressed in this episode are based on my knowledge of those subjects at the time of publication. If you are having a medical problem, have a medical question, or are having a medical emergency, please contact your physician or visit an urgent care center, emergency room, or hospital. Please rate, review, and subscribe to Mother Knows Death on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere you get podcasts. Thanks.